Get her off this plane. The command cracked through the first-class cabin of Skycrest Flight 418, loud enough to silence the soft hum of the air vents and the clink of ice in plastic cups. Heads turned. A man in a Navy security jacket stood beside seat 1A, his jaw tight, one hand extended toward Danielle Brooks as if she were a problem that needed to disappear before takeoff. Danielle did not move. She sat upright in her window seat, one hand resting on the closed leather folder in her lap, the other lightly touching the armrest. She wore dark jeans, a charcoal blazer, and flat black shoes. No designer labels. No diamond watch. No assistant hovering nearby. Just a black woman traveling alone, looking calm in a cabin where calm had suddenly become a crime. "Ma'am, you need to come with me," the security officer said. His name tag read Grant Holloway. Across the aisle, Megan Carlisle, the lead flight attendant, stood with her arms folded and a smile that never reached her eyes. "We've explained this already," Megan said. "That seat is reserved for a priority guest." Danielle slowly lifted her boarding pass. "This is my seat," she said. Her voice was low, even, almost too quiet for the tension gathering around her. It scanned green at the gate. Megan gave a short laugh. Then there must have been a mistake. Behind her, a white man in a tailored gray suit waited with a carry-on bag at his feet. He did not say a word. He did not have to. The seat Danielle had paid for was already being treated as if it belonged to him. A few rows back, a young woman lowered her phone from where she had been checking messages. An older couple exchanged a glance. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" But nobody stood. Nobody spoke. The cabin stayed trapped inside that familiar kind of silence, the kind that pretends not to notice when something wrong is happening right in front of it. Danielle looked at Grant, then at Megan. "Please check the system again," she said. "Properly." Megan tapped her tablet with sharp, impatient fingers. Her eyes moved across the screen, paused for half a second, then hardened. "There is no Danielle Brooks assigned to 1A. Danielle's expression did not change. "That is not what your screen showed 2 minutes ago." Megan leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel personal. "You are delaying this flight. You can either move to the back or leave the aircraft." Danielle looked down at the slim silver watch on her wrist. Then she looked back up. "You have exactly 6 minutes to correct this." Grant frowned. "Is that supposed to mean something?" Danielle's eyes held his, steady and unreadable. "It means you should be very careful about what you do next." Megan rolled her eyes. "Security, escort her out." The plane went still. Outside the window, rain streaked across the runway, lights in thin silver lines. Inside, no one knew that Danielle Brooks was not just another passenger. No one knew she had boarded this flight before dawn to quietly inspect the airline that was expecting a $5 billion rescue package the next morning. And no one knew that in 6 minutes, the people trying to remove her from seat 1A would learn what it costs to mistake dignity for weakness. Grant Holloway did not like the way Danielle Brooks looked at him. It was not fear. It was not panic. It was not even anger. It was the kind of stillness that made loud people feel exposed. He shifted his weight in the narrow aisle and glanced toward Megan Carlisle, waiting for her to take control again. Megan did not hesitate. "Ma'am, you were asked to move," she said, her voice sharpened for the audience gathering around them. "You are refusing a crew instruction." Danielle kept her eyes on the tablet in Megan's hand. "You did not verify my reservation," she replied. "You replaced it." Megan's lips tightened. "I do not have to explain our internal seating process to you." "No," Danielle said. "But you will have to explain it to someone." The man in the gray suit finally stepped forward. His name was Richard Vale, according to the platinum luggage tag hanging from his carry-on. He looked at Danielle with the impatient confidence of someone used to rooms making space for him. "Is this really necessary?" he asked Megan. "I have a connection in Denver." Megan turned toward him immediately, her tone softening. "We are handling it, Mr. Vale." Please take your seat. Danielle watched the difference in their voices. The difference was not subtle. It was not hidden behind policy or procedure. It was right there in the way Megan had questioned Danielle's name, her clothes, her presence, then welcomed Richard as though the cabin had been waiting for him. A woman in row 3 leaned into the aisle. She showed you a boarding pass, she said. Her voice shook, but it carried. Megan turned with a practiced smile. Ma'am, this is a private security matter. It did not look private when you announced it to the whole plane, the woman replied. Grant stepped closer to Danielle's seat. Please stand up. Danielle looked at her watch again. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Somewhere across the airport, in a glass conference room overlooking the terminal, Skycrest executives were preparing for a morning announcement that could save their company. They believed Brooks Meridian Capital would approve a $5 billion emergency financing package at 9 o'clock. They believed the money would stabilize fuel contracts, calm nervous lenders, and keep thousands of employees from facing uncertainty. They did not know their future was sitting in seat 1A, wearing jeans and holding a boarding pass that had just been erased. Danielle reached into her blazer pocket and removed her phone. Grant lifted a hand. No calls until we sort this out. Danielle looked at him. You are not taking my phone. The words were quiet, but they landed with weight. Megan stepped forward again, her face flushed now. You are making this more difficult than it needs to be. Danielle gave her a long look. No. You made it difficult the moment you decided I did not belong here. For the first time, Megan looked uncertain. Only for a second. Then she tapped the screen again and said, There is no record of you in this seat. Danielle's phone buzzed in her hand. A message from Naomi Price, her executive assistant, appeared on the screen, boardroom ready. Awaiting your signal. Danielle read it once, then locked the phone and placed it back in her pocket. She looked at Grant. You have 3 minutes left. Grant's brow furrowed. 3 minutes until what? Danielle leaned back against the seat, calm as the rain sliding down the window beside her. Until this airline learns the difference between removing a passenger and removing its last chance. Grant glanced toward the open aircraft door, then back at Danielle as if the rain outside might offer him an easier answer. It did not. The cabin had changed in the last 60 seconds. People were no longer pretending to read magazines or adjust headphones. Phones rested openly in hands. Faces had turned toward seat 1A. The woman in row 3 stood halfway from her seat, her voice firmer now. Why are you refusing to check her reservation? Megan Carlisle gave her a cold look. Please remain seated, ma'am. I am seated, the woman said. I am also watching. That sentence moved through the cabin like a current. A man near the aisle nodded. Another passenger lowered his laptop and said, her boarding pass was valid when she got on. Richard Vale shifted beside the seat that was supposed to be Danielle's. He looked uncomfortable now, but not uncomfortable enough to step away. He kept one hand on the overhead bin and stared at the floor. Danielle noticed. She had spent 20 years in boardrooms learning that silence often came dressed in expensive clothes. Megan lifted her tablet again. This passenger's information cannot be verified, she announced. For everyone's safety, we are asking her to leave the aircraft. Danielle's gaze stayed on her. You are using the word safety because it sounds better than bias. A hush fell across the first-class cabin. Grant's expression hardened. Do not accuse my crew of anything. Then do not give me evidence, Danielle said. Her voice remained controlled, but every word had an edge. She had seen this pattern before. At 21, she had stood in a hotel lobby in Baltimore while a clerk questioned whether the credit card in her hand belonged to her. At 28, a lender had smiled politely while asking whether she had someone more experienced to explain her own business plan. At 34, after she built her first investment firm from a rented office above a pharmacy, a man at a private club had asked if she was there to cater an event. Every moment had tried to make her smaller. Every moment had taught her the same lesson. People did not need to know your name to decide your value. They only needed permission from their own assumptions. Grant extended his hand again. Ma'am, stand up now. Danielle looked at her watch. 2 minutes. You are about to make a decision you cannot reverse, she said. Megan laughed once, too quickly. You keep making vague threats. Who exactly do you think you are? Danielle looked past her, through the open doorway, toward the gray runway and the terminal lights glowing through the rain. Someone who gave this company a chance when nobody else would. Megan's smile faded. Her tablet chimed. She looked down. A red notification flashed across the screen, then vanished before anyone else could read it. Grant noticed the change in her face. What is it? He asked. Nothing, Megan said, locking the tablet. But it was not nothing. Across the airport, Naomi Price had sent a single message into Skycrest's executive system. Financing review paused. Await further instruction from Danielle Brooks. In the cabin, Danielle rose slowly from seat 1A, not because Grant had ordered her to, but because she had decided the moment had arrived. She picked up her leather folder, smoothed the front of her blazer, and faced Megan with a calm that made the flight attendant step back. You had every opportunity to do the right thing, Danielle said. You chose the story you wanted to believe. Then she walked toward the aircraft door, with the entire cabin watching, and neither Grant nor Megan understood that they were not escorting her out of the plane. They were walking straight into the first minute of their own collapse. The jet bridge felt colder than the cabin. Rain tapped against the glass walls in a steady rhythm, and the airport beyond them looked washed in gray light. Grant Holloway walked a few steps behind Danielle Brooks, close enough to signal authority, careful enough not to touch her again. Megan Carlisle followed with her tablet pressed against her chest, her polished smile gone now. Behind them, the aircraft door remained open. Passengers watched from their seats through the narrow frame, their faces lined up like witnesses in a courtroom. Danielle stopped halfway down the jet bridge. Grant frowned. Keep moving, ma'am. She turned slowly. Where exactly am I supposed to go? Back into the terminal, he said. You are no longer permitted to remain on this flight. Danielle glanced at the gate clock. 1 minute and 12 seconds. That is interesting, she said. Because your airline invited me here. Megan stepped forward, trying to recover her confidence. Nobody invited you to disrupt a flight. Danielle looked at her. I did not disrupt anything. I presented a valid ticket. You chose to turn that into a spectacle. Megan opened her mouth, then stopped. A voice came from the aircraft doorway. She is right. It was the woman from row 3. She had stepped into the front galley, ignoring the nervous look from another flight attendant. You never checked her reservation. You just decided she did not belong. Grant turned toward the cabin. Ma'am, please return to your seat. The woman did not move. I will, after somebody explains why a valid passenger was removed because a man in a gray suit wanted her seat. Richard Vale stood behind her, still holding his carry-on. His face had gone pale. I did not ask them to remove her, he said quietly. Danielle met his eyes. You did not have to ask. You accepted what they gave you. His gaze dropped. The words landed harder than shouting could have. Then Megan's tablet began to ring. Not chime. Ring. A sharp, repeating alert that cut through the jet bridge. She looked down and froze. Grant leaned toward the screen. What is that? Megan tried to turn it away, but Danielle had already seen the red banner across the display. Emergency Finance Review. Skycrest Executive Access Required. A second notification appeared beneath it. Brooks Meridian Capital has suspended all pending credit facilities. Grant stared at the words without understanding them. Megan's fingers trembled around the tablet. This has to be a system error, she whispered. Danielle's phone buzzed. She answered without looking away from them. Naomi. Her assistant's voice came through clear and steady. The board is assembled. The financing package is paused. Fuel suppliers and lenders have been notified that no funds will be released until you authorize it. Danielle nodded once. Good. Put Skycrest's chief executive officer on standby. Grant's face changed. Who are you calling? Danielle ended the call and slipped her phone into her pocket. The rain kept falling. The cabin behind them had gone completely silent. She looked at Grant, then Megan, and her voice stayed calm. You wanted me off the plane so badly. Now you can explain to the company why its $5 billion lifeline walked out through this door. For 3 long seconds, neither Grant Holloway nor Megan Carlisle said a word. The message on Megan's tablet glowed red between them, impossible to ignore now. $5 billion. The number did not sound real inside a narrow jet bridge beside a delayed flight. It sounded too large for rain-streaked windows, too large for a woman in jeans holding a leather folder, too large for the certainty they had carried only minutes earlier. Grant finally found his voice. You are saying you control the financing package? Danielle Brooks looked at him without triumph. I am saying you should have checked who you were accusing before you decided I was disposable. Megan shook her head, forcing a laugh that broke before it could become convincing. This is ridiculous. Skycrest has investors, lenders, a board. One person cannot just stop everything. Danielle's expression did not change. One person cannot. But the chief executive officer of Brooks Meridian Capital can. The aircraft behind them stirred with whispers. The passengers had heard enough. The woman from row 3 placed one hand against the galley wall and looked at Megan with open disbelief. You removed the person funding the airline? Richard Vale stepped away from seat 1A. He no longer looked like a priority guest. He looked like a man realizing he had benefited from something ugly because it had been convenient. I did not know, he said. Danielle turned toward him. That is the problem. You did not need to know. You only needed to notice. Richard swallowed and looked toward Megan. Her ticket was valid. I saw it. Megan's face tightened. You are all misunderstanding the situation. No, Danielle said. You are finally seeing it. Her phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen was Victor Langford, Chief Executive Officer of Skycrest Airlines. Danielle answered and placed the call on speaker. Danielle, Victor said, his voice strained and breathless, what happened at gate 22? Danielle looked directly at Grant and Megan as she replied. Your lead flight attendant removed me from my assigned first-class seat. Your security supervisor escorted me off the aircraft. My valid reservation was erased to make room for another passenger. Silence came through the phone. Not the quiet of a dropped call. The quiet of a man calculating how fast a company could fall. Please tell me that is not true, Victor said. Megan stepped forward. Mr. Langford, there has been a misunderstanding. We were following procedure. Danielle's eyes sharpened. Procedure does not erase a confirmed passenger from a system. Procedure does not decide a black woman cannot sit in a seat she paid for. Grant looked toward the terminal, then back at Danielle. His confidence was gone. We did not know who you were, he said. Danielle held his gaze. You did not need to know who I was to treat me with basic respect. On the phone, Victor exhaled slowly. Danielle, I am coming to the gate now. Do that, she said. And bring your board chair, your general counsel, and every executive who signed off on the culture that made this possible. She ended the call. The red warning on Megan's tablet flashed again. Pending financing suspended. Liquidity review initiated. The flight crew had tried to make Danielle Brooks feel small. Instead, they had triggered an alarm that was now moving through the entire airline, floor by floor, screen by screen, until every person with power at Skycrest understood the same terrifying truth. The woman they had removed was not waiting for permission to be heard. She was the reason the company had been given another day to survive. The gate area began to change before Victor Langford arrived. It happened quietly at first. A supervisor appeared near the terminal entrance, speaking urgently into an earpiece. Then another employee came from the operations hallway with a laptop open against his chest. Their eyes moved from Danielle Brooks to Megan Carlisle, then to the red alert still flashing across the tablet. No one needed to explain what the color meant. Red was not a delay. Red was not a customer complaint. Red was the color of a company realizing its next decision could cost more than money. Danielle stood near the window at the end of the jet bridge, looking out at the wet runway. Her reflection floated in the glass beside the airport lights. For a moment, she was not at gate 22. She was 16 years old again, standing beside her mother at a regional airport in Cleveland. Her mother had saved for months to take Danielle to a college summer program in Washington, District of Columbia. They had arrived early, dressed neatly, carrying one small suitcase between them. But a gate agent had looked at their tickets, looked at their faces, and asked if they were in the right terminal. When Danielle's mother calmly showed the confirmation number, the woman had sighed as though being asked to read was an inconvenience. Danielle remembered the way her mother had held her hand. Not tightly. Not dramatically. Just enough to say, without words, do not let them see you break. Later, after the flight finally boarded, her mother had whispered, people will try to make you prove you belong in rooms they never had to earn. Do not spend your life begging them to see you. Danielle had carried that sentence through every rejection, every meeting, every deal where someone assumed the man beside her was in charge. She had not built Brooks Meridian Capital to prove strangers wrong. She had built it so people like her would never have to wait for strangers to decide whether they deserved respect. Danielle. Grant's voice pulled her back. He stood several feet away now, his posture smaller than before. I need to apologize. She turned toward him. For what? Grant looked down. For how this was handled. That is not an answer, Danielle said. How was it handled? He hesitated. Megan watched him with wide eyes, as if she could still stop the truth from entering the room. Grant swallowed. You were treated unfairly. Danielle's face remained calm. Because? Grant looked toward the passengers watching from the open aircraft door. Then he looked at Danielle again. Because we judged you before we verified anything. Megan stepped in quickly. Grant, do not say things you cannot prove. Danielle turned to her. You had proof. You ignored it. Megan's tablet rang again. This time the alert was louder. Skycrest fuel payment authorization pending. Lender review in progress. Her face lost its color. At the far end of the terminal, a group of executives moved quickly toward gate 22. Victor Langford was at the front, his tie loosened, his expression stripped of every polished answer he had prepared for investors. Danielle watched him approach through the glass. Then she looked at Grant and Megan one last time. You thought this was about a seat, she said. It was never about a seat. It was about what you believed I deserved before you knew what I could do. Victor Langford reached the gate with 3 executives behind him, each moving fast enough to show panic but trying hard enough to hide it. The board chair, Eleanor Shaw, followed with Skycrest's general counsel, Martin Reeves. Their polished shoes clicked against the tile as they entered the jet bridge, then stopped when they saw Danielle Brooks standing by the window. For a moment, nobody spoke. The rain outside had softened to a silver mist, but inside the narrow corridor, the air felt charged. Victor looked at Danielle as if he had rehearsed a dozen apologies on the way over and forgotten every one of them when he arrived. Ms. Brooks, he began. Danielle turned toward him. Do not start with my name now. Your employees had my name when I boarded. Victor's shoulders dropped. Behind him, Megan Carlisle stared at the floor. Grant Holloway stood beside the wall, silent. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice careful. We have received the preliminary incident report. We understand there was a serious failure in procedure. Danielle's gaze moved to her. This was not a failure in procedure. It was a choice. They saw a black woman in simple clothes, decided she did not belong in first class, and then built a procedure around that decision. Martin Reeves opened his tablet, but he did not type. There was nothing legal language could soften now. The woman from row 3 had stepped into the jet bridge doorway with several passengers behind her. Richard Vale stood among them, holding his carry-on at his side. I saw her boarding pass, he said. It was valid. They ignored it. Megan lifted her head. Mr. Vale, that is not exactly what happened. Richard looked at her, shame tightening his face. It is exactly what happened. I let it happen because the seat was offered to me. His words hung in the air. Danielle looked at him for a long moment. Thank you for saying it, she said. But truth arrives late when people only speak after the cost becomes visible. Victor took one step closer. Danielle, please. The financing pause is already creating a crisis. Our lenders are calling. Fuel vendors are demanding confirmation. We need to resolve this immediately. Danielle's expression stayed still. You need to resolve what happened to every passenger who was treated this way before today. You need to find every complaint that was buried under words like misunderstanding and protocol. You need to ask why your people felt comfortable deciding who belonged based on appearance. Eleanor's face hardened as she looked toward Megan and Grant. Is there any record of prior complaints? Martin answered quietly. There are several unresolved service reports involving seating disputes and passenger profiling concerns. Megan's eyes widened. Those were not proven. Danielle turned to her. Neither was your accusation against me. But you acted on it anyway. The tablet in Martin's hand buzzed. He read the message, then looked at Victor. The first lender has suspended its review. They are asking whether the Brooks Meridian facility has been withdrawn. Victor closed his eyes for one brief second. Danielle took out her phone and called Naomi Price. Naomi, she said, keep every facility paused. No funds move until Skycrest agrees to a full independent audit, immediate suspension of the employees involved, and a public plan for restitution. Victor looked at her, stunned. You are holding the company hostage. Danielle ended the call and faced him. No. I am holding it accountable. There is a difference. Victor Langford looked as though he wanted to argue, but the words would not come. Around him, the executives had stopped pretending this was a routine customer dispute. Eleanor Shaw stood with both hands clasped in front of her, studying Danielle Brooks with the careful attention of someone who had just discovered the cost of overlooking the wrong person. Martin Reeves checked his tablet again. Another alert appeared. Then another. Skycrest's financing team had received requests from 2 fuel suppliers, 1 aircraft maintenance contractor, and a regional lender. Everyone wanted the same answer. Was Brooks Meridian Capital still standing behind the airline? Danielle watched the notifications reflect in Martin's glasses. You built a company that expects trust, she said. But your employees did not offer trust to a woman holding a valid ticket. Victor's face tightened. We will investigate. We will take appropriate action. Danielle shook her head once. Appropriate action is what companies say when they want time to make the problem quieter. I am not asking for a statement. I am asking for a change that people can measure. Megan Carlisle finally spoke. Her voice was smaller than it had been inside the cabin. I did not mean for any of this to happen. Danielle turned toward her. What did you mean to happen? Megan looked down at the floor. I thought there was an issue with the seating list. No, Danielle said. You thought I was the issue. The words landed without anger, which made them harder to escape. Grant Holloway shifted beside the wall. I followed what I was told, he said. Danielle looked at him. That is why systems like this survive. One person makes an assumption. Another person enforces it. Everyone calls it policy. The passengers in the doorway stayed quiet. The woman from row 3 wiped at her eyes, then lifted her phone. My name is Claire Morrison, she said. I have the entire thing recorded, from the moment they questioned her ticket. Martin looked toward her quickly. Ma'am, we would appreciate it if you shared that with our legal department. Claire held his gaze. I will share it with the public if your legal department tries to bury it. A murmur of agreement moved through the passengers. Richard Vale stepped forward, his gray suit suddenly looking less like armor and more like a reminder. I will give a statement too, he said. I should have said something sooner. Danielle nodded. Then say it clearly. Not because I am a chief executive officer. Say it because no one should need a title to be treated fairly. Victor's phone began ringing. He looked at the screen and went pale. It is the chair of the lender group, he said. Eleanor took the call from him, listened for several seconds, then ended it with a grim expression. They are suspending all discussions until this incident is addressed. Victor looked at Danielle. What do you need from us? Danielle opened her leather folder. Inside was a prepared document, printed before she ever boarded Flight 418. She had come to Skycrest expecting to decide whether the airline deserved support. Now the answer was being written in front of her. Immediate paid suspension for Grant Holloway and Megan Carlisle, she said. An independent review of every discrimination complaint filed in the last 5 years. A passenger restitution fund. Mandatory training designed and led by people who understand the harm your policies have ignored. And a public report with real numbers, not polished promises. Eleanor looked at the document, then at Victor. We can authorize that. Danielle closed the folder. You can authorize it today. Whether I restore your funding depends on what you do tomorrow. The decision moved through Gate 22 with the speed of a storm warning. Eleanor Shaw stepped aside with Martin Reeves and spoke in low, urgent tones. Within minutes, Grant Holloway's security access was suspended. Megan Carlisle's flight credentials were placed under review. Their tablets stopped responding. Their employee badges no longer opened the staff corridor doors. No one shouted. No one needed to. The small red lights on their screens said enough. Megan stared at her badge as if it had betrayed her. Grant stood with his hands at his sides, looking toward the aircraft where he had once carried himself like the final authority. Danielle Brooks watched them without satisfaction. She had not paused $5 billion to enjoy anyone's embarrassment. She had paused it because consequences were the only language some institutions ever learned to understand. Victor Langford returned from a call with the lender group, his face drained. They are demanding a public response before markets open, he said. Our operations team says we have enough liquidity for now, but not enough certainty to reassure anyone. Danielle nodded once. Then stopped trying to reassure them. Tell them the truth. Victor looked at her. The truth will damage the company. The truth did not damage the company, Danielle said. The choices that created it did. Claire Morrison stepped forward from the doorway, still holding her phone. She is right, she said. If this had happened to someone without money or influence, you would have called it a misunderstanding and sent everyone home. Her words settled over the gate. Even Martin Reeves did not argue. Danielle looked toward the open cabin door. The first-class seats were visible from where she stood. Seat 1A remained empty now. Richard Vale had moved to a different row, leaving the space untouched. It looked ordinary from a distance. Gray leather. A folded blanket. A small bottle of water in the cup holder. But Danielle knew how much meaning people could force into a seat. Who belonged? Who was believed? Who was asked to prove themselves while others were welcomed without question? Naomi Price called again. Danielle answered. The board needs your decision, Naomi said. Do we terminate the financing package entirely? Victor's eyes lifted sharply. Eleanor stopped speaking. Every person at the gate seemed to lean toward Danielle without moving. She looked through the glass at the rain fading over the runway. Then she remembered her mother's hand at that Cleveland airport, steady and warm, refusing to let humiliation become the final lesson. Danielle had learned something else that day. Power was not only the ability to walk away. Sometimes it was the discipline to demand better before you stayed. No, Danielle said into the phone. Do not terminate it. Victor released a breath he had been holding. Danielle continued, convert the facility into conditional funding. No money moves until the independent audit begins, the restitution fund is established, and the board signs the reforms in writing. Naomi's voice remained precise. Understood. I will draft the conditions and send them to Skycrest within 10 minutes. Danielle ended the call. Victor stepped forward. Thank you, he said quietly. Danielle met his eyes. Do not thank me yet. Earn the chance to mean it. Then she turned toward Grant and Megan. You will have your own opportunity to speak during the investigation. But understand this. What happened today was not a mistake because I am powerful. It was wrong before you knew my name. The gate fell silent again, but this time the silence was not hiding anything. It was listening. Victor Langford looked toward the terminal clock, then back at Danielle Brooks. The morning had begun with a delayed departure and a dispute over one first-class seat. Now the airline's chief executive officer stood at gate 22 waiting for conditions from the woman his employees had tried to dismiss. The contrast was impossible to miss. A few feet away, Grant Holloway and Megan Carlisle remained under supervision while Martin Reeves documented the incident. Passengers who had planned to fly across the country were still gathered near the doorway, no longer strangers passing through an airport. They had become witnesses to a truth that could not be folded into a customer service report. Danielle opened her leather folder again. Inside was a photograph she had kept for years. It showed her mother standing outside their small home in Cleveland, smiling into a summer afternoon, one hand resting on Danielle's shoulder. Her mother had never seen Brooks' Meridian capital become what it became. She had never sat in the boardrooms Danielle now entered. But every hard-earned room Danielle occupied carried something of her mother's voice. Do not let their ignorance decide your worth. Danielle closed the folder and looked at Victor. There is one more condition. Victor nodded quickly. Name it. Your company will not write this off as an employee problem, Danielle said. Grant and Megan made choices. But they made those choices inside a culture that taught them they could question some passengers more than others. Eleanor Shaw stepped closer. What are you asking for? A public meeting with your board within 48 hours, Danielle said. Not a private apology. A public commitment. You will release the audit findings. You will create a permanent passenger equity office with authority to investigate complaints independently. And you will include travelers and employees in the review, not just executives and lawyers. Martin Reeves looked up from his tablet. That would require a board vote. Danielle held his gaze. Then vote. Victor looked toward Eleanor. The board chair did not hesitate this time. We will schedule it, she said. Today. A message appeared on Danielle's phone from Naomi Price. Draft conditions delivered. Danielle forwarded the document to Victor. He opened it and scanned the first page. His expression changed with every line. The conditions were detailed. Funding would be released in stages. Every stage depended on proof, not promises. The first payment would not move until Skycrest signed the suspension orders, announced the independent audit, and created the restitution fund. Victor looked up. This is strict. Danielle nodded. It has to be. People have been asking your company to listen for years. Claire Morrison stepped forward again, her phone lowered now. My brother was treated like this on a flight last year, she said. They said he looked suspicious because he asked why his seat changed. He never filed a complaint because he thought nobody would care. Danielle turned to her. Tell him to file it now. Claire's eyes filled, but her voice stayed clear. I will. Richard Vale stood nearby, holding his carry-on with both hands. I will submit a statement too, he said. And I will tell the truth about what I saw. Danielle nodded once. That is where repair begins. Victor signed the first acknowledgement on his phone. Eleanor signed after him. Martin Reeves sent the suspension orders. Across the gate, Grant's badge flashed one final red light. Megan's tablet powered down. Danielle watched neither of them. Her focus had moved beyond them, beyond the gate, beyond the plane waiting at the end of the jet bridge. "This is not revenge," she said, her voice carrying through the quiet terminal. "This is what accountability looks like when people stop confusing power with permission." The first official statement went out before the rain stopped. Skycrest Airlines posted a message across its website and social media accounts acknowledging a serious incident at Gate 22 and announcing an independent investigation. The language was formal, careful, and far too late for the passengers who had watched Danielle Brooks be treated as though her presence required an explanation. But this time, the statement was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a record that could no longer be erased. Inside the gate area, Martin Reeves received the first files from Skycrest's internal complaints system. His face changed as he read. There were reports from travelers who had questioned seat changes, asked for help, or simply arrived dressed in ways employees did not expect. Some had been labeled difficult. Some had been marked unresolved. Some had disappeared behind phrases like insufficient evidence. Eleanor Shaw took the tablet from him and read in silence. "How many?" Danielle asked. Martin looked up slowly. "More than 30 reports in the last 5 years that need review." Megan Carlisle's eyes widened. Grant Holloway stared at the floor. Danielle did not look surprised. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the long morning. "That is why this cannot end with 2 suspensions," she said. "People do not create a pattern alone." Victor Langford nodded, but his face carried the weight of a man realizing how much he had failed to see. "We will contact every passenger," he said. Danielle held his gaze. "Do not contact them only to protect your reputation. Contact them because they were owed dignity when it happened." Claire Morrison stepped closer, her phone still in her hand. "Can I say something?" Danielle nodded. Claire looked toward the executives. "I watched all of you arrive after you learned who she was. But the woman in seat 1A deserved help before anyone knew her name. That is the part you need to remember." No one interrupted her. Richard Vale nodded slowly. "She is right," he said. "I had the easiest chance to stop this. I wanted the seat, so I stayed quiet." He turned to Danielle. "I am sorry." Danielle studied him for a moment. "Then make your apology useful. Tell the truth when it costs you comfort." Richard nodded again, this time without looking away. Naomi Price called with an update. Danielle answered. "The first group of lenders has agreed to wait for the board vote," Naomi said. "They want confirmation that the independent audit will have full access to records." Danielle looked at Eleanor. "Will it?" Eleanor did not hesitate. "Yes. Full access. Put that in writing," Danielle said. "And include employee interviews without retaliation." Martin began typing immediately. The flight at Gate 22 remained delayed, but no one complained about the time anymore. The passengers understood that something larger than a departure schedule was unfolding. Danielle walked toward the aircraft door and stopped beside seat 1A. She did not sit down. She simply looked at it, then turned back toward the gathered crowd. "I will not take this seat today," she said. "Not because I was pushed out of it. Because no seat is worth more than the people who are still being pushed out of rooms like this every day." Then she picked up her folder and walked back into the terminal, leaving the empty seat behind her and leaving Skycrest with a choice it could no longer avoid. By late afternoon, the story had moved far beyond Gate 22. Screens across the airport carried the same headline about Skycrest's emergency financing review, but Danielle Brooks did not stop to watch them. She walked through the terminal with Naomi Price beside her, both of them moving past coffee shops, departure boards, and travelers rushing toward gates without knowing how close one airline had come to losing everything in a single morning. Naomi held her phone to her ear, listening to updates from the Brooks Meridian board. "The conditions are signed," she said after ending the call. "The passenger restitution fund has been established. The independent auditors have been given access to the complaint files. Skycrest has also agreed to place Grant Holloway and Megan Carlisle on immediate paid leave while the investigation continues. Danielle nodded. Good. Make sure the review includes the supervisors who approved those past reports. Naomi looked at her. It will. Behind them, Victor Langford caught up near a row of windows overlooking the runway. He had removed his jacket, and his tie hung loose around his collar. For the first time that day, he looked less like the chief executive officer of an airline and more like a man facing the consequences of what his company had allowed. Danielle, he said. She stopped but did not turn immediately. The board has approved the passenger equity office, Victor continued. It will report directly to the board chair, not to operations. We are also bringing in outside advocates to help build the review process. Danielle faced him. That is a start. Victor nodded. I know it is not enough. No, Danielle said. It is not enough. But it is more than another apology. Victor looked toward the runway, where Flight 418 still waited at the gate. The passengers are asking whether the flight will depart. Danielle followed his gaze. That is your decision. They want you to return to your seat, he said quietly. Danielle's expression softened, but only slightly. I am not returning to prove I belong there. Victor lowered his eyes. I understand. A few steps away, Claire Morrison stood with Richard Vale and several other passengers. Claire raised her phone, not to record now, but to show Danielle a message from her brother. He had watched the video she sent him. He had written only one sentence, maybe someone will finally believe us. Danielle read it, then handed the phone back. Tell him they will, she said. And tell him his story belongs in the audit. Claire nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. Richard stepped forward next. I sent my statement, he said. I told them I accepted the seat because I thought staff knew better. Danielle looked at him. What do you think now? Richard took a breath. I think silence can look polite while it is doing real harm. Danielle nodded once. Remember that. Her phone buzzed again. Naomi glanced at the screen and smiled faintly. The board has authorized the first conditional release once the audit begins tomorrow morning. Victor's shoulders loosened with relief. Danielle held up one hand. Do not mistake conditional funding for forgiveness. This company still has work to do. Victor nodded. We will do it. Danielle looked past him at the aircraft, then at the people gathered around the gate. Make sure you do it when no cameras are here, she said. That is when character becomes policy. The next morning, the rain was gone. Sunlight stretched across the glass walls of the airport, turning the runway pale gold as Skycrest Flight 418 prepared for departure under a different kind of silence. The passengers had been rebooked, the crew had been replaced, and seat 1A remained empty by choice. Danielle Brooks stood near the window with Naomi Price, watching the aircraft push slowly away from Gate 22. She did not look victorious. She looked resolved. In less than 24 hours, Skycrest had signed the first conditions of its reform plan. The independent audit had begun. The Passenger Equity Office had opened its first case file. The restitution fund was active. And every executive who had once treated the $5 billion facility as a rescue without responsibility now understood that money could not repair what people refused to face. Naomi checked her phone. The first audit team is already interviewing staff, she said. They found 12 additional reports that were never escalated. Danielle looked through the window as the plane turned toward the runway. Then 12 people were ignored before anyone cared enough to count. Naomi was quiet for a moment. You could have walked away. Danielle nodded. I could have. You could have pulled every dollar and let the airline fail. That would have been easier, Danielle said. But easy is not the same as right. Behind them, Victor Langford approached without the hurried panic he had worn the day before. He carried no tablet, no lawyers, no prepared statement. Just a folded piece of paper. I wanted to give you this, he said. Danielle took it. It was the signed board resolution creating the Independent Passenger Equity Office, including a line that required public quarterly reports and direct review by outside advocates. She read it once, then handed it back. "Keep it," she said. "You will need to remember what you promised." Victor nodded. "I will." Danielle looked at him. "Do not make this about me. I had leverage. Most people who are treated this way do not." Victor's eyes lowered. "I understand." "Good," Danielle said. "Then build a company that does not require someone to own the future before they are treated with respect in the present." Claire Morrison appeared near the gate entrance with her carry-on bag. She was leaving on another flight, but she paused when she saw Danielle. "My brother filed his complaint this morning," she said. "He said he almost deleted it 3 times." Danielle smiled softly. "Tell him he did the right thing." Claire nodded. "He said thank you." Danielle watched her walk away, then turned back toward the runway. The aircraft was moving faster now, gathering speed beneath the clear morning sky. Somewhere inside, passengers were taking their seats, fastening belts, trusting strangers with their journey. Danielle understood that trust could never be demanded. It had to be earned, one choice at a time. She picked up her leather folder and started toward the terminal exit. Naomi walked beside her. Behind them, gate 22 grew smaller with every step. Danielle did not look back. She had not needed a camera to prove what happened. She had not needed to raise her voice to be heard. They had tried to remove her from a plane because they believed she did not belong. Instead, they learned that real power was not the seat someone gave you. It was the future you refused to fund until dignity had a place in it.